I'm sure we're all familiar about the argument whether the egg came before the chicken or if the chicken came before the egg. Well, this talk is not about answering that question, but about inserting a ladybug into the spectrum. A spectrum of reproduction. Reproduction is a form of production. It's a renewal of sorts, a cycle explaining how molecules interact to form groups of life, which in turn produce others. Unfortunately, we become so absorbed in the individualism of our lives that most overlook these interactions. Thus, we fail to actively comprehend the magnitude of our interactions, thereby lessening our chances of survival as a species. I was first introduced to this concept as a child through a ladybug. I've simplified the spectrum of interconnectedness through a triangle. The composition of a triangle contains the existence of all living things. The three sides embody time, light, and motion, interpreting what will momentarily remain after we perish. Despite the permanence that these three forms of matter have in our lives, they are in fact temporary. As we once perish, so do the fundamental building blocks that shape all forms of life. This is further identified as a temporality of the triangular spectrum. Temporality exists as a result of metamorphosis, a continuously evolving production of interactions, a continuous web of reproduction that will one day facilitate the end of our existence through the termination of time, light, and motion. These are black and white factors, as we know that our interactions have consequences that in turn lead to terminations. But what contributes to these factors beside interactions? How can we break down these interactions? How do we come to be without our consent? How do we perish without our consent? What drives us for the need of enlightenment? These questions further fit into the terms of the burden of existence and lightness. Firstly, lightness is what we may consider as God, a term of enlightenment where we are purified and reach a godlike status. In turn, there is the burden of existence, which is the heaviness of existing and not consenting to life. It is formed through the weight of living. Therefore, our fundamental purpose is to revolve our lives around the need for lightness, within the burden of existence that prevents us from this enlightenment. This yearning is further trivial, as what is the purpose of wanting something we cannot have? Moreover, this trivial matter of creating a purpose that drives us to want more can be blamed on temporality. As soon as we develop a consciousness, we are enslaved to temporality. All events in the universe are determined by pre-existing causes, including moral choices. This means that there is a cause and effect relationship between all events in the universe. Hence, there is no free will, as all our relations are connected within predetermined interactions, revolving around the triangular spectrum of temporality. We never wanted lightness in the first place, but are made to do so because we are temporality itself, thus lacking any free will. Nevertheless, this process of unpurposeful and predetermined reproduction is depicted in the title of this talk, in Metamorphosis, where the conceiving of a ladybug's transformations feed the spectrum of temporality to populate the enslavement for the yearning of lightness within the burden of existence. Moreover, now that we have established the fundamental basis of my work and of all existence, I will explain my most crucial piece, Prima Noapte. Corresponding to the spectrum in my work, I have created parallels between my Romanian heritage, our familiar relations, the triangular spectrum of temporality, and ladybugs themselves. In an equal comparison to the previous depiction of the spectrum, I have organized myself, my grandmother, and a cow. This further depicts how my heritage originated, with my grandmother guarding a grazing cow, sustaining itself by producing a carbon footprint, just like us all. By consuming grass, the animal releases methane and carbon dioxide during the digestive breakdown of nutrition. These carbon levels are consistent throughout an organism's life. However, they alter as soon as one perishes. In addition, carbon dating decays as well as the cow itself, as it can perform chemical and physical transitions just like all matter. In other words, the animal exists in the same space as my grandmother and I. Thus, we're all the same as we all go through the carbon dating cycle and will all eventually perish to form another. In other words, myself, the cow, and my grandmother are identical mirroring images of one another, built off the interactions of others in the same space, just as we all exist in the same space called Earth, which is further translated into art. In simpler terms, that is how I'm capable of translating the spectrum of temporality into work, into a visual attempt of comprehension. I'm sure this talk has been a mouthful, and I hope that my work can fill the cracks of understanding just as it did for my grandmother. Prima Nuapte were my last words to her. Before her passing, she was essentially exposed to the fundamental form that makes up her granddaughter in all matter, and she was proud of it. I like to think that it brought her peace, and that she was able to forgive temporality for its termination, as she was one of the people who first introduced me to my existence. She was the one who gave me ladybugs. She made me into one, into her buburuza. To end my talk, I would like to thank the interactions and existence of all present today, as because of your interactions, I was able to show my grandmother Prima Nuapte, my last words to her, a token of the imprint of her existence, of her metamorphosis as my ladybug, as my buburuza. Thank you.